Hello everyone. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting. It would really help the channel out quite a bit. Thank you very much. Welcome to another episode of Graveyard Talk, and I'm your host, Randy. Today we're at Woodmere Cemetery in Detroit, and we're going to be talking about, I did a little B-roll, so I'm going to put up their headstones here. We're going to talk about the hunger strike from 1932 with Ford Motor Company. Now, some of you may or may not know, some of you union people may know that in 1932, at the Ford Rouge Plant, there was a protest that started in Dearborn. As the protesters got to the Dearborn city limits, the guards from the Rouge Plant met up with the city police from Dearborn, and they opened fire on a bunch of protesters. And in that group was Joe York, Coleman Lenny, Joe DeBlasio, and Joe Brussel. There was 4 of them. The 5th one was the name of Curtis Williams. Curtis Williams was a black man. And they were all shot. They were all killed. Now you can see right there, that's the Ford Rouge Plant, and over this way a little bit would be the city limits of Dearborn. Anyways, they were all shot. They were all killed. 4 of the 5 were buried here in Woodmere. The 5th one, which would be Curtis Williams, the 5th one could not be buried here. Not that he didn't want to be buried here, or I should say the family didn't want him buried here. But in 1932, this cemetery was white only. So to get his ashes here in the cemetery, what his family did was they rented a plane. And as that plane flew overhead, they dumped the ashes of Curtis out, so his ashes would land upon Woodmere Cemetery. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. Again, my name is Randy and welcome to Graveyard Talk. And today we're going to be here trying to do a spirit session for the 5 unemployed auto workers who were shot and killed on March 7th, 1932. I showed you the graves a few minutes ago of 5 of them. The 4 that were actually killed on March 7th was Joe York. They have it listed here as Coleman Lenny, but it's K-A-L-M-A-N, Kalman Lenny. Joe DeBlasio and Joe Bussell. The 5th one was Curtis Williams. He actually died like 5 months later. And of course, he was black and they wouldn't let him bury him here. Of course, that's different nowadays, but back then. So I got a little cheat sheet here that I'm going to read from. I'm going to put my glasses on. So the Ford Hunger March, sometimes called the Ford Massacre, was a demonstration on March 7th, 1932. It took place during the height of the Depression. It started in Detroit and it went to Dearborn towards the Ford Rouge Plant. I showed you the outline of the Ford Rouge Plant, which is, I don't know, over my shoulder here. I don't know how far it is, maybe a mile from here. More than 60 workers were injured that day. The protesters were met by the Dearborn Police Department and security guards by Ford Motor Company. It is believed, in what I read, that the Ford security guards were the ones that shot these 5. But anyways, they wanted to work. They didn't want handouts. They didn't want crumbs. They wanted bread was their thing. Their cry was, we want bread, not crumbs. Remember back in those days, they were trying to get the unions all over the place, and Ford was one of the biggest deniers of the union. I did work for a union for a while, a couple different unions, Teamsters, UAW. Everyone's got their own beliefs of whether the unions help, and I think in the beginning they did. They helped. During my time, on both of my jobs that I worked, they actually cost me my job. So I also worked for Atomic Chemical Workers Union, and they cost me my job every time. Every time we went to do a negotiation, the majority, for me, my own personal experience, the majority of the voters voted in the new contract, and the company said, look, if you vote in the new contract, we're going to lay tons of people off. They did, and I got laid off, and I never, on any of those jobs, ever got called back. So to the spirits here, in Woodmere Cemetery, I beg your indulgence. I only want to speak to the the 5 hunger strike workers here, the 3 Joes, Coleman and Curtis. If you would do me the honor of letting me talk to them, I'll be back again to talk to you guys. And so with that, any of the 5 hunger strike workers here, the 4 that were killed on March 7th, and Curtis, which was who died from his injuries 5 months later, which would have been 8, so that would have been what, August of 32. Any of the Ford hunger workers, protest marchers, would like to talk to me.
Not really.
Not really?
I eat there.
All right, to the 3 Joes, Curtis and Coleman, I hope you guys don't mind me calling you 3 Joes. It will save me a little bit of time and my old brain from trying to remember. Would you like to tell me why you were marching that day? I know what the report said. Why were you marching on March 7th? I heard to keep the peace. I'm gonna assume it was a peaceful march. Were there other riots going on that day or fighting going on that day? Some.
Everything.
Okay, of the 5 of you, the 3 Joes, and Russell and Coleman, who am I talking to? All right, now I had heard Ed in there. Now let me tell you, I'm not that far from the gravesite of Eddie Slavic. I do plan on doing a session from him today as well. He's probably about 100 yards from me. Eddie, if that was you, Eddie Slavic, if that was you, I will be over to see you when I get done doing what I'm doing here. Would that be okay? Well, today's a very hot day. It's nearing 90 degrees, and as you'll notice, my background has changed a little bit. From me, the 3 Joes, Lenny and Coleman, are buried just in front of me. But unfortunately, where I was sitting in the sun, my camera doesn't like the sun and it will shut down. So we're back again trying to do this session with the 3 the 5 protest marches from 1932, the Ford Motor Hunger Strike. And I stopped off by asking which Joe that I was talking to. I actually should have said that which spirit was I talking to. Which one of the 5 Ford workers, the protesters, the marchers, which one of you would like to talk to me? Please give me your name. So I heard me, thought I heard Joe or Joseph, heard Ghosts, thought I heard Lewis as well. So would you guys like to tell me why you were marching on that day, on March 7th? Why were you marching and why were you heading from Detroit to the Rouge Plant in Dearborn?
Normally there. Difficult. No.
Okay, I heard difficult to explain. Try, if you can give me 1 or 2 words, try to give me 1 or 2 words as to why you were marching that day.
Don't.
In there.
Okay, and as I always say, it doesn't matter what I say, doesn't matter what I hear. What matters is what the spirits bring across on the spirit box, on the speaker that we can hear. And that's all that matters. Even if I don't hear them, I believe they say things that they put down underneath that I can't hear with my ear, that they want us to know about, but maybe they just don't want to talk about it now, or they want to talk about it later. So it's too hard to explain. It was it a peaceful march? So I heard there was other protests going on that day. Is that correct? Reports. And why do you think, now it's been said that all 5 of you were shot by the Ford Motor Company security guards. Do you know if that is true or not? I heard that's a fact. I heard I believe it. So let's do it this way. Come out with 1 word, true or false. As far as you know, true or false. Just true or false. You were shot by the security guards for Ford Motor Company. Okay, I didn't hear either true or false, but one little personal fact is that in 1932, my grandfather, Peter Hunt, worked for the Ford Motor Company. He was Henry Ford's accountant. Now notice I said he was Henry Ford's accountant. He wasn't Ford Motor. He worked for Ford Motor. He was paid by Ford Motor, but he wasn't Ford Motor Company's personal accountant. He was Henry Ford's personal accountant. He kept Henry Ford's personal ledger. And sometime in the 30s, my grandfather, who was not a teetotaler like Henry Ford, he had one of the company cars, and after work, my grandfather went out, and my grandfather got totally drunk, shit-faced drunk, took his car and hit a bridge viaduct and virtually destroyed the car. I don't know to this day if my grandfather was injured. He never talked about it for the most part. But Henry Ford, when Henry Ford found out that my grandfather was drinking, Henry Ford fired my grandfather. Well, being that my grandfather was Henry Ford's personal accountant, my grandfather knew many things about Henry Ford that Henry Ford didn't want to get out. So Henry Ford put his bulldog on my grandfather, Harv Bennett, and made him fire my grandfather, and basically told my grandfather, don't ever come back to Ford Motor Company. Well, I'm not too sure how long it was between the time my grandfather was fired and the time my grandfather was rehired, but what we do know is my grandfather came to Harv Bennett and basically told Henry Ford's right-hand policeman, security man, whatever you want to, bodyguard, whatever you want to call him, that he was going to go public with information if he didn't get a job. So what they did behind Henry Ford's back is they rehired my grandfather, and they put him down into the steel mill, and they put him into a blast furnace area. And my grandfather worked way down in the bowels of Ford Motor Company, where everyone knew Henry Ford would never go. And until 1966, that's where my grandfather worked. Many of my family worked for Ford Motor Company. I never did. And that's always a story. I don't know true or not true. So let me ask you guys here that were actual Ford Motor Company workers at the Rouge where my grandfather worked. His name was Peter William Hunt. Did any of you guys know my grandfather? We have talked with much. Okay. So one of you at least remembers talking to my grandfather.
You know, the colors. So, just no.
Employee. Now, my grandfather was not a big man. He was a small man. He was only about 5'6", very meek, very mild, but he loved his alcohol. And that's what I remember about my grandfather. So getting back to you guys here, did you provoke the Dearborn police, the security force from Dearborn Rouge Plant? Did you provoke them in any way for them to fire upon you? Never. Right off the bat, never. All right, what do you think prompted them to shoot into the crowd? All right, so I'm sure you guys know that many things have changed over the years. It has been, what, 88 years, something, 32 to 24, 88 years, something like that. no, it'd be less than that, but 92 years. 92 years. What do you guys think about the status of the Union from then to now? What do you think about Ford Motor Company? Of course, Henry Ford has been dead since 1948, which would have been, what, 16 years after you guys died? I heard bummed. So do you think the company is better now, or was it better in your time? All right, and to the five of you, what would you have to say, what would you like to say to us in 2024 about what you did? Are you glad what you did? How do you feel about what you did? Was it worth dying for?
What I
All right, I heard right off the bat real clear what I don't know. Do I have to listen? What I saw, maybe? What you did? If you could give us all a bit of advice on what you've learned from your experience, from your death, what would that piece of advice be?
I just felt like
I heard I just felt, see them. May felt or I just fell, see them. Did you say how you felt or how you fell? Both.
It's fine.
All right, so you, from where you're at, all you have to do is look to the right, your right, and you can see the Rouge Plant. What do you think about the Rouge Plant itself today? All right, and for this last couple of questions, I want to speak directly to Curtis. Curtis, you were a black man living in 1932. We know that couldn't have been easy. You were marching with probably 99% white people. And you were shot as well. Do you think you were singled out? Hello, Mary Ellen. Curtis, I'll ask again, do you think you were singled out being a black man, that they shot you on purpose strictly because you were black? And what about this cemetery? I know your family wanted you buried here, but they were unable to bury you here because this was at that time a segregated cemetery. But your family got one up on them by flying overhead and burying or distributing your ashes over the cemetery. Sound like I heard airplane in there. You got the last laugh on them. Are you happy about that? All right, I heard somebody say, "Hey, buddy." Who said, "Hey, buddy"? Hey, Curtis, did you want to be buried here? Did you want to be laid to rest here with your other marchers?
Everything.
Weird. I heard coffee cup and then I heard Crockett. And Crockett is the last name of the person that is buried about 20 feet to the, I guess, north from where Curtis. Curtis, did you know Albert Crockett? Now, Albert Crockett, I believe, was born in 1925, so I just make him a kid. So maybe he's talking, because I heard something about being together when they were asleep. So it may be the fact that they're roaming the cemetery together. So with that, as I always do, I'm going to let the speaker box go for about a minute, and then we'll wrap this up.
To it.
I'm stuck.
Alrighty, so during that time I heard I'm stuck, I'm hurt, I heard I'm floating at least twice. So Mary Ellen is here. She will help you guys if you need help crossing over. Mary Ellen, will you help those? That was quick. I heard I have. Alrighty. And with that, I want to thank the three Joes. I want to thank Coleman and I want to thank Curtis for spending a little time with us today. I hope that it was interesting. And I see a car in the reflection of my camera pulling up, or at least passing by me. And we're going to go over to Private Eddie Slovik's grave and do a session there. So keep watching. I'll have something up about him, a session for him. Hopefully that's interesting as well. Hopefully when we read this, it'll come out that's interesting. Remember what I always tell you, it's not what I have to say, it's what they have to say. And hopefully they had a lot to say that I didn't hear. And we'll get some idea of how they feel about the march and what they've done. And with that, I'll catch you all on the next one.